Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. I'm joined today by Jeevan Caliente, CEO and co-founder of OpenSpace, and Adam Citino, Solutions Engineer Manager. Jeevan sold his first company, Siftio, to 3D Robotics, where he eventually became the president. 3DR partnered with Autodesk to launch SiteScan, a tool for documenting and analyzing job sites. Jeevan was most recently an entrepreneur in residence at Lux Capital, and he holds a BS from Stanford and an MS from MIT, where he was a National Science Foundation graduate fellow. Adam has been in the AEC industry for 17 years. He spent 7 years in design as an architect and the last 10 years in construction as director of VDC. His passion for identifying where technology can improve how we design and build has led him to the tech world at OpenSpace. Welcome to the show, Jeevan and Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
I always like to start out with hearing kind of your backstory on how you got into the industry to begin with.
Cool. Adam, do you want to go first? Yours is more interesting than mine.
I'll go first. I guess my question was, how far do you want to go back? Because my mom would claim it's when she was pregnant with me because we were building our house, but I don't think you want to go that far back. So I went to undergrad for business school and then didn't really have any jobs I liked after that. And I always, when I questioned what I wanted to do, it always went back to, I did a lot of drafting classes in high school and learned AutoCAD on AutoCAD version 12 and 13. And I always really enjoyed that. So I ended up going back to architecture school. I got my master's. I did architecture for about 7 years, helped roll out Revit at 2 architectural firms. And that's kind of where I did my toes more into the more advanced technology. And then I made my switch over to construction as assistant PM. And after about a year, I got a call from my previous boss and he asked, do you want to be the BIM guy? I was like, what does that mean? He's like, I don't know. Do you want to figure it out? So I'm like, sure. So that was the evolution of the VDC department there. And for the last 8-9 years, I've been working on developing that department and rolling out all the new technology. And it's been a great time doing it. And recently decided to make the move over here to the tech side with OpenSpace.
Nice. So you've had a pretty good cross section then of AC, a little bit of everything there. That's awesome.
Yeah, and as for me, I studied a variety of different things in undergrad and then in grad school, most notably artificial intelligence. And then I got my start in technology, started a company with a friend of mine, a grad school friend of mine, right after we finished our degrees. And then that went well. That was a hardware company where we manufactured stuff, venture-backed technology company. And we were fortunate enough to sell the company and get acquired. And at the acquiring company, I got into the world of construction and real estate development, where we built a product in partnership with Autodesk. That was a site scanning tool that used a drone. It's called SiteScan. And I really fell in love with it, both from the technology side, really from the customer and user side. A lot of my own scar tissue comes from trying to build physical stuff in factories, and that's tough, but construction is about 100 times tougher. So ended up president of that company. And then after I left, took 6 months off, joined a venture fund called Lux Capital as a so-called entrepreneur in residence, and then reconnect with a couple of other friends of mine from the Media Lab at MIT, where I went to grad school, and they both did computer vision and went off and started companies of their own. And Mike, one of my co-founders, sold his company to Twitter, did his tour of duty at Twitter, and gave me a call one day with a project he was working on. And listened to it. I was like, you could really use this, Mike, as people that build buildings. And so we bootstrapped the company for a while, then realized we're onto something. And working with a lot of GCs and owners, since I had a lot of those past relationships from my prior company. And when we thought we were onto something, we decided to give it a real go and started OpenSpace back in 2017.
Nice. What was kind of one of the main aha moments for creating OpenSpace?
Well, prior to OpenSpace, it was pretty obvious to me that a picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm not really breaking any news. Everybody understands that, but I think it's very, very true for anybody that works in real physical reality. The system of record should be based on what's out there in reality. documents and drawings are great, but they don't represent the actual work being done. And so 3D Robotics, the company that acquired my first company, we built a drone-based tool, and there was a lot of neat, fancy things it did. But ultimately, when it really came down to it, what the superintendents, like people on the field, is like, okay, now I know what's going on. I can just look and see from anywhere what's going on, and me and my teams can like align on reality. So the fighting and back and forth just goes down when you can just reference what's really there. And so that thought was kind of in my mind with OpenSpace. With OpenSpace, we had the opportunity to build a technology company from the ground up around that observation, as opposed to kind of shoehorning a technology into it, which we did at the prior company, which worked. Drones solutions are valuable for sure, but they don't necessarily cover as much ground really as what we do here. So that was a big deal. And then really we had a huge aha moment in the bootstrapping phase of the company, where we pride ourselves in simplicity and ease of use here. We think that's the main thing that's made us successful so far. But you never really know how simple simple needs to be until you're really out there with the customer. And I can remember going over an early prototype of OpenSpace with a PM, Nick Mirkovich, great guy, West Builders, and he saw what we did and he had a lot of positive things to say about it. But when he found out how long it took to use for that first iteration, he was really blunt. He was like, "It's a cool idea, Jeevan, but there's no way in hell we're going to use it." And I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Yeah, I mean, you're here all the time. Like, who here has the amount of time to go and take all these photos like you did with this early prototype?" And he was totally right. And then he gave us the idea. It was like, what I would do is if I could just walk the job, I walk the job anyways, and my guys do it. If so, a little background on OpenSpace works is you walk a project, you take a little 360 camera. These are consumer products. You can buy them anywhere, along for the ride. And then as a byproduct of walking the job, we take all the video taken and convert that into something like Google Street View, where you can kind of see what's there without literally being there. Yeah, so Nick gave us that aha moment. He basically told us exactly what we needed to build. Now, we were pretty sure that was the right direction for the company, but hearing it from the user and the customer directly, it was like all the confirmation we needed. And so, yeah, that was the big, okay, we know what we need to do. Here's a problem we need to solve. Let's go off and do it.
Yeah, I love that kind of grounded in the practical reality of what's actually happening on the job site. And then you said a line that was really good on, you don't know how simple needs to be. I think that's great. I think it's so easy to think you have a simple idea, but still kind of overcomplicate it. And just kind of, it's hard to take the time to really strip away of like, what is the kind of bare minimum that really needs to happen to get somebody to actually take action on it.
Yeah, it sounds kind of silly, but being on the side of construction with guys in the field, it sounds silly, but 5 clicks could really versus 2 clicks could really be that difference in adoption. So it really does have to be simple for guys to use it out there. And I mean, they stumbled on something great because progress photos is a pain point for every single project out there. Everybody has a camera in their pocket now, and they can take hundreds and thousands of photos, but then you got to manage those. You can never go back and find them. I could take 100 photos in this room, it's a small room. I guarantee the one photo I need, I'm not going to be able to find at the time that I need it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So how I want to kind of zero in on some innovation and culture to help kind of ground the conversation. How do you transition a culture from one of having, maybe a dedicated resource to innovation, or maybe even a small team that's really geared on kind of simplifying and innovating, to one that the culture relies really on everybody to make innovation happen?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think one of the most important thing is to get others involved in that decision-making process. A super looks at a project a different way than a PM does. A PM looks at a project different way than an MEP coordinator. So you want to get all those different perspectives. I made that mistake early on, rolling out something that didn't really work for the field, and everybody got angry. So I started bringing in more people for their feedback, and it actually helps with that adoption down the road as well. If people were involved with that process, they're more likely to buy into it. They're more likely to use it out in the field. That's one thing. The other, you really need that executive buy-in. This may have to start at the grassroots, but of course they have the checkbook, so they're going to buy that software. But also if the messaging is coming from the top down, then that's going to help that culture spread. And I really lucked out with that because when my position was created, I already had that executive buy-in because they realized they were falling behind the competition with the technology that we weren't using. So everything that I brought forward that had some value, I could go out and purchase. And then another thing is choose tools that are easy to use and provide a lot of value. If it's not easy to use, they're not going to use it, and you're not going to see that value. And if you're bringing tools that the field teams are getting value from, they're going to be invested. They're going to want more of those tools. They're going to get hooked and be asking you for more and start to identify those opportunities out there where there may be a technology that can help out. And one of the biggest things I'd say is education, education, education. If, you can have a toolbox full of technology, but if people don't know what it can do and the value it can bring and when they should use it, it's not going to get the use, and you're not going to get that culture of using technology in the field. And we used to do this by doing a VDC 101 because it's really, the people in the field, they're going to identify where this stuff is used. So they really need to know how it can be used, the value it can bring, and give them those examples where, super ABC on project XYZ saw the value of laser scanning, or, this project, here's a use case of where they saved a ton of money with openspace. So those are really the factors that I consider of how to get that culture going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I would jump in from my side, which is more from the other side, just with the addendum, is I think it's incumbent upon us as people that create these systems, again, just to make them easy. Like, make it easy on your would-be customer to give your technology a shot and see if it provides value. If you're going to make them jump through a million hoops, then you're not going to be successful, And the thing I would add is, to the best of your ability, try to identify opportunities to work with not just innovation teams, but the people that are actually going to use the technology. And that depends on what you're bringing to the table. But if it's a field tool, like, work directly with the PM, see if they buy into it. Because ultimately, those are the PMs or PEs or supers or whoever it happens to be that happens to be who you think your user is going to be. Ultimately, it's whether you're providing value to them. That'll be the difference between whether you're have the product market fit that you're seeking or not.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's kind of incumbent on the industry then too to set aside some kind of white space for people to innovate outside of their normal kind of day-to-day task and operations?
Yeah, I'll give one quick answer. I'm kind of curious what Adam thinks about that. To me, I would never want to start a company that relied on that sort of thing to exist. And the reason is it's just very risky as to whether that group will accurately represent the needs and pain points of the company that they're in. By the way, it's not because those people are unable to do that. It's just like always going to be a little gap between people that are trying something new and people that are actually like doing the thing that makes that company money. So for general contractor, building buildings on time and under budget. So for me, I always look to see to work, again, not just exclusive with innovation groups, with others. And if I'm working exclusive with an innovation group, I always have a little discount in my mind. If they're happy with it, that's good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we've hit pay dirt. But I think it's an important question because there are legitimately some things that could really improve how we do things that just require more study and more effort that an innovation group can provide that, your operational teams may not have time to do. So I don't know. I really would massively defer to Adam on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I said you got to get the other people involved. Everybody looks at a project a different way, and what's going to be useful to them is different than what's going to be useful. What's going to be useful to a superintendent might not be so useful to a PM. So you do really need to get all the perspectives. I was a VDC guy. I love technology. I'm obviously going to be interested in pushing this stuff and seeing where we can use it. But you do need that other perspective of where, okay, what's reality here? How is this going to be used in the field? Is it really going to be used this way, or is it not? And is it simple enough for the people in the field to use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm more than agree. I mean, this is not a knock on innovation teams because I think they serve a really valuable function. But I think people need to do a better job of really democratizing innovation. Innovation should not just be left to a specific team. It should be really kind of on everybody's job to seek and look and be empowered to find those kind of even 1% small improvements that they can make and bubble those up to the top so that you're getting those different perspectives from all facets and all vantage points, because that's when you really get the full picture. If not, you're just operating in a silo.
Yeah, when I've seen them work well, it really depends on the implementation. And so outside of construction, there are these innovation teams at basically every large company, and they've structured in various ways. Where I've seen it successful there, but also in construction, is when you have innovation teams that do a good job of having a really deep relationship with the rest of the company, right? Sometimes that means that the innovation teams are not permanent. It's not your permanent job, but you're like, people cycle into the innovation team, right? And they do a tour of duty there, and then they go back to their sort of like normal job. But that way, there's a lot of cross pollination, and idea exchange, where the innovation team an effort is really tied intimately with the main line of the business, but there's still that space for exploring new ideas. Or an alternative is where you have a project where, for whatever reason, that's kind of the innovation project. This is, I think, pretty common. And you get to try new things on it, and there's permission to do that. And you're doing it, though, with the people that whose role it is to erect the building, and they'll move on to the next project maybe with some new ideas and lessons learned, such that the innovation group isn't like siloed off somewhere. These are structures that I've seen work pretty well from my vantage point.
Yeah, and we were actually starting that rotation phase right before I left. We were going to start bringing people in and rotating through the VDC department. We actually just brought somebody in, and then COVID hit. We had to move back to being an APM. But we were just getting back in the mode of doing that again. That's valuable. But there's also, I had my champions out there, right? So I knew the guys who were willing to try technology and use it. And those are, as Jeevan said, it might be a team or a project you want to focus on. If you're going to do that, you got to make sure some of those champions are on that project, or all the efforts, the pilot, all the efforts to go in and try this tool is just going to go to waste because they're not going to use it. So you have to identify those champions and make sure to be successful, testing out the tool out in the field and to get the results that you were thinking you might get, or not get.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I like the rotation idea, to continuously kind of injecting new blood and getting those fresh perspectives. I think that's a great idea. What do you think are some of the challenges to make technology work well in construction that you guys have found?
My biggest one was adoption. If people don't adopt it, they're not going to use it, and you're not going to realize the value of the tool. And there could be a few reasons that was happening, and we've talked about a couple of them. It could be that the technology is too complicated, or it just doesn't work as promised, and then people just get frustrated. They toss it to the side. And great example of that is it's very common these days for everybody to have drawings on their mobile devices, right? But it wasn't too long ago, it was pushing the supers, pushing the PMs to use these devices. And the super would be like, I like my paper drawings. It's kind of like everybody likes a newspaper, right? I get that aspect, the physical. It's like, all right, how do you keep those up to date? They print out the RFIs, they print out the sketches, they tape them to the back of the drawing. So most of the time it's lagging because no one has time to do that. So it's outdated. And then I would ask the question, okay, you're up on level 6. How long does it take you to walk that half mile back to the trailer to look at the drawings? I'm like, well, it takes me about 20 minutes. Okay. And then you get stopped, 5 or 10 times on the way with questions. So poking those holes gets them to adopt it. And then it wasn't too soon after that I walk into a trailer and there's a big arrow pointing at the drawing set saying outdated, don't use, with an arrow pointing to the iPad connected to the TV on the wall, use this instead. So once you had that small win, it kind of snowballed into the bigger win and got everybody adopted. So it could just, that adoption hindrance could be the technology is too complicated. It could be the people, like I said, there's the people are always going to try out technology. There are going to be people on the fence, and there are going to be people who just don't want to learn it. They don't want to try it. They don't want to deal with it. Maybe they had a bad experience with technology. Maybe they have technology fatigue. There's been a lot of tools that have come out the last few years, and people are just tired of learning something new. And then back to education, could just be a lack of education. They don't know what the tool can do, and they don't know what the value can bring. So if you're not going to get the adoption, you really got to dig into why, because if you don't have that adoption, you're not going to see the value, and then it's not going to, get the use that you were hoping it was.
Yeah, I think the education component, I'd add messaging to that as well too. And what I mean by that is, I think you get somebody that's excited for a new piece of tech, and they're seeing it from kind of their vantage point and the benefits that they're seeing. But when they go to talk to the other stakeholders and people involved in having to implement it, they're just saying it from their point of view and not relating it back to how it's beneficial to somebody else and their job. And so they're not getting that buy-in, because they're like, okay, well, great, it's a cool piece of tech for you, but it's just adding more work to my plate. And they're not getting the connection of, well, actually, this would be beneficial to you as well. Just nobody's really delivering that message.
Yeah. And that was the purpose behind those VDC 101s, to get that education, and the messaging. You have to have those aha moments. If you don't have those aha moments, then they don't realize the value. And the tools that are easier and simpler, you get those aha moments a lot quicker. And the tools that are a little more complicated might take a little longer, but you'll eventually get there if you keep that messaging out there.
Yeah. Well, shifting gears, I'd love to dive into industrialized construction and kind of unpack that for our remaining time here. But let's start by kind of defining the terms. It means something a little bit different to everybody. Would love to hear how you guys define industrialized construction.
Yeah, I can tackle that one. I think a lot of people just think of it as, it's just like prefab and modular with a new name. And I think there's some truth to that, but when I think about the term, I think of it a little bit broader than that. Like, what is the inspiration behind prefab and modular? It's to bring the efficiencies that you see in manufacturing to construction. And so prefab and modular capture part of that, in the sense that your goal is to produce stuff, right, in a repeatable, controlled environment, and that you'll be more efficient if you do. But there's also things that, I've lived myself, that can be benefits from manufacturing, which have to do with visibility. Like, you can more easily observe things in an industrialized or manufacturing setting than you can in construction, which allows you to have a system of record and make decisions to optimize or fix things more quickly, without having things to like go up a 30-day chain of back and forth of decisions and verifications and things like that. So, I mean, a lot of reasons why open space exists is that theory of manufacturing is nice. It's not always true. Like, when you're manufacturing something, knowing what's going on in the factory can be quite challenging, right? But if you have like a video camera or images, then you can get stuff done even if the factory is like 6,000 miles away. And construction has the same problem. What is actually going on the project? So I think prefab and modular is part of industrialized construction, but I think the other is, how do we bring tools and processes to a project that, number one, enable us to even know what's going on there. And then if we do know what's going on there, we can start making decisions that have the flavor of what goes on in a factory as opposed to a construction site.
Yeah, nice. Well, what do you think the potential then of IC is, and maybe some of the hurdles that could hinder that potential?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give my answer, and then I'd love to hear what Adam thinks. I think for me is a couple of things I think are important to observe, or I would my take anyways. Um, you know, we've all seen that graph of productivity going up and up and up in other sectors, and construction kind of, just flat, no, almost goes down. What's happening, right? And that has much ink has been spilled on like figuring that out. Um, and I think there's a variety of things we need to do to inflect that graph up. I think the first challenge is to recognize that construction is not manufacturing. There are just things that are different about it at a fairly fundamental level. So importing processes kind of wholesale probably won't work. And there could be some big failures if you try to do that. I think Katera is like an example of that. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Katera didn't work, and I think probably a lot of things that they were doing that were smart. But certainly, one could theorize that a very wholesale approach of just importing a manufacturing mentality into construction was maybe not the best approach. So I think it's all about noticing specific things and applying them in clever and wise ways. So for us, I think applying the benefits of visibility to construction is something that we can do. I mean, that's one of the things OpenSpace does, right? Is we make what was not recorded and invisible before, visible and easy to access. And those allow you to do certain manufacturing things, like identify problems quickly and measure them and move on. So yeah, I think that's how I would think about it. The benefits are that you can start to operate in a more efficient way, but the challenges are really about not thinking of it as some silver bullet or something that you can just sort of cut and paste from manufacturing to construction and expect it'll all work. But I would really be curious to get Adam's take on this.
Yeah, I don't think I can count how many times I've seen that graph brought up in a presentation, and which drives me crazy every single time. They neglect to mention that it's not the same. The building industry and the construction industry is not the same as manufacturing. Every single building is a prototype. You're not building the same thing over and over. Prefab's awesome, great. You can build in, controlled conditions. Modular is also good. It makes things easier. But even with those, you still have different sites. You have different soil conditions. You have different site constraints. You have different project requirements. So every project is a prototype. And I was actually looking at that graph recently, and I noticed that it started to dip down in 2010 when all this technology started to be introduced. So my kind of current theory right now is that was where a lot of the technology started being introduced in construction. That dip is people learning it, right? They're not being as efficient because they're learning those technologies and learning what it can do. And the problem now is we've been so good at collecting information and sending information along. Now we're buried by the information, right? So the next step is sort of, what our core product does with the progress tracking, giving information when you need it and making it easy to find. And then with our progress tracking tool, automating progress tracking off of those photos. So now we're creating tools to take all that information and make better sense of it so people can make decisions quicker and they have that right information at the time they need it without all that extra effort. So I don't think we can really make it a production line like manufacturing, but we can work on the processes and the workflows. And if we can improve those a bit, people can concentrate on other things that will make a bigger impact as well.
Yeah, those are some really great points. So in light of that, how do you really then empower and then bring the digital tools to the field and the physical space that is construction?
So I think it goes back to those champions. You start with them, you get them out in the field, you find a new tool, you pick their brain, will it work? If they agree, you purchase it, get them to try it out on a project and get those small wins, like I said, because those small wins will turn into bigger wins, because then you can share that information with the other teams, see where it's getting the value. Then hopefully there's a champion there that tries it out. And I'm telling you, once you solve one problem for a super or one problem for a PM, they keep coming back for more. if you're wrong once, it goes the opposite direction. So you want to make sure you do it the right way. And then again, it goes back to that education, planting those seeds and, cultivating them, and do the messaging like you said earlier, get the message out there and just keep pinging them and pinging them and pinging them, because they forget really quick. They need to hear it and see it 3 or 4 times. And the training also and the education has to be at the right time too, because if they're not going to use it right away, they're going to forget about it. So you need to keep that up, and it's easy to fall behind on that.
Totally agree with that. And I think, again, just making it easy, making it simple. Can you give something to someone that doesn't really require them to like learn that much, is familiar to them in some way, is a piece of gear that they already want, or already understand, is not something they're afraid that they're going to break, or like it'll get messed up or in some way. I think those are all things, because basically lowering the cost to trying something is something that's pretty important, I think, from the point of view if they're trying to create these solutions. There's another term that people use. I think VCs use this, and technology people use it, product people. It's called time to value. It's a pretty simple idea. It's like how much time elapses between you trying something to you feeling like you've gotten value out of it. Really making that as short as possible is a very good thing to do. Some things have a very, very short time to value, like food. Like you're hungry, you eat the food, it hits your mouth, you're like, great, got it, love it, right? Implementing a new ERP system could have a really long time to value. Sometimes it's infinite, and you're like, why did we buy this stupid piece of software? So I think that's another thing when you're trying to bring things to projects, is it's hard to predict, right? You can't necessarily guarantee that time to value will be exactly X minutes or X days, but your tool could have some features to it that lend it to a short time to value. And that's something we focus on a lot here at OpenSpace too. We can't predict when that controversial change order will happen that we can help solve. But we do know that there's lots of little wins that just happen when there's a tool like ours, and we can get those aha moments in the customer's hands that we can feel pretty comfortable. They won't be waiting too long to have that moment. And that's how Adam was talking about champions, people that like to try new things. I like to think of us creating champions. If you can bring something to a project and take someone who was skeptical, and then they're like, dude, this thing is great, like, do not take it away from me, then you almost have created a champion who may be willing to try other things now that they've had that kind of eureka moment themselves.
Those are the best wins. The one who fought you the entire time, didn't want to try it, and then they have that aha moment, and it all becomes, and then they're in love with it. Those are real valuable wins. But to one of the things that Jeevan said, that's one of the reasons I came here. I researched, I used technology for a long time, but I felt a lot of software companies do. They create the bells and whistles and the fancy things and all those advanced features to sell the product right away. But then when you get into it, the core functionality doesn't work that well. So you can't get to those other tools. I had an example where we switched to a different project management and documentation control tool that also had QA/QC issue tracking. And we went from something that was great with the documentation and plans to this where the library wasn't as good and people just threw it aside. So I could never get to that next QA/QC level that we wanted to get to, because everybody touches the drawings, right? And they would just throw it aside. Here, we've gone the opposite direction, where the core product is so simple and easy to use, it's easy to get that adoption. And now we can build this stuff like progress tracking on top of it and more tools, coming down the road. And it'll be easier to get that adoption because the core product works as we promised, and it works well. So then, we can build on top of that.
It goes back to how we started of, keeping it simple, and how simple is simple, and kind of stripping it away, making it the core functionality as tight and simplistic, easy to use as possible, and then start growing from there and build off of that.
Yeah, and it's not easy to do, by the way. Like
no, it's very hard.
Yeah.
It's much harder to do it that way.
Yeah.
So if I could give you guys all power, and you could innovate, just, snap your fingers, innovate one thing in the industry, what would you guys choose to tackle to innovate?
Oh man, that's a good question. Jeez. Yeah, I mean, I would say teleportation, actual teleportation. I'm thinking big here. Like if you could get, I think so much of construction that is tough is just, I mean, I'm not breaking any news here. It's moving stuff from point A to point B, and I mean, on the site itself, and also just throughout the supply chain. Um, if you could just get the materials, so much of it is just logistics, right? And that's how schedules get all crammed up and screwed up. Is well, we can't do anything because the tiles are not in the laydown yard. So sorry, and
Yeah,
just being
you
able to
lose a
like,
couple of weeks.
yeah. So yeah, sorry, I'm thinking Star Trek level here, innovation. So I don't know, Adam, do you have something?
Hey, I love it. I've asked a lot of people that question, and nobody has thought that big, and I am all for it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
If he's going teleportation, I'm going magic wand. I'll go Harry Potter on you. There you go. No, but no, I think there's one thing that's been out there a while, and I keep thinking it's close, is augmented reality. It's one thing to know what's there with images and photos. It's another thing to know what's supposed to be there while you're out in the field.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of potential there. Nobody's been able to quite figure out how to lock it in. I mean, you can lock it in at first, but as soon as you start to move, it starts to float. So, but I see a lot of potential in the augmented reality. So I want somebody to figure that out.
I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to go from Star Trek to a little bit closer at hand. I think um, that would be fabulous, like these augmented reality, mixed reality systems. I think Adam hit on something. There just haven't been quite easy enough to use, or just kind of a little annoying. And that's enough to be like, screw it. And so, it's nice to know that companies like Apple, who have a very high bar on whether something is worth them launching, are like thinking about this. Because I think not everything they do works, by the way. You may remember or may not remember their whole force touch thing. Remember on iPhones where if you press a little harder, it would do something? It's gone.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
no one used that. So they don't bat 1,000. But I feel like if they're working on this, then there's a chance that, we in construction and development could benefit from it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like we're so close there on that front, but we've been so close for a while.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah,
Sooner or later, it has to just cross over and edge out. But
did a bunch of pilots, and every time it's like it seems so promising. It's like, no, this isn't ready. It's right on the
yeah,
fence there. It's about to tip, but hopefully soon.
someday. Well, how do people find out more information on OpenSpace and connect with either of you?
Yeah. So openspace.ai is our website. If you want to learn more about us, you can just email info@openspace.ai. And I think the best place, honestly, if you want to see what we're up to, is LinkedIn. Just find us on LinkedIn. You just type in openspace.ai and follow us. You see a lot of our news and most importantly, what our customers are doing, which is probably a lot more valuable than the stuff that we're putting out there ourselves. And you can find me there too. My name's Jeevan Kalanathi. If you go to OpenSpace, I guess I should spell my name Jeevan is my first name. That should be enough information for people to hunt me down.
Same for me. I'm not on Instagram or Twitter, so LinkedIn is the place to find me. SETTI.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, final question for you both. What does innovation mean to you?
I'll tackle that one first, Adam, I guess. And to me, I think people think about it in these like spaceships and robots kind of way, which is cool and great. I like that stuff, definitely. But to me, it's just identifying a new way to do something that you need to do. And that new way is better along some axis. Generally, it means it's faster or easier and more efficient. Sometimes it means it's more fun, like that. That is an innovation, can be true as well. I think that's most of it. The other part is identifying a totally new activity, period, that seems worth doing. that happens too. That's pretty rare that people happen on some new thing that is like, oh, now we humans want to do this new thing that we haven't thought of before. Like probably whoever invented the film projector in movies, that's an example of that. But I think the bulk of it and a lot of value we can bring is just, yeah, finding faster, better, cheaper, easier ways to do things that we have to do. Anyways, to keep our civilization humming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a perfect answer. I would agree with that. I think it's, yeah, pushing the boundaries, being curious to try new things, and look at other industries. We talked about manufacturing a lot, but there's other industries. I don't think laser scanning started in manufacturing. It probably started, in the medical field or somewhere else in, in something else, and now it's on the construction site. So it's kind of exactly what you even said, just trying to find things that can improve what you're doing today so you can be a little better tomorrow. And those might not be big things. Like I said, take those small wins, and those small wins will turn into bigger wins. And same thing with innovation. When I started that department, I had to, start with the MEP coordination and the, 3D logistics type stuff, but it wasn't too far along before laser scanning, drones in the skies, using stuff like openspace, and all the fun stuff came into play. So that's what I would say.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to join us, both of you. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.